The first thing she said was, "There he is, officer. That's the man who broke into my house. Arrest him." Her voice cracked the stillness of the afternoon like a whip, shrill, commanding and false. And I just stood there. Suitcase in hand. Feet planted on the stone path I'd paid a fortune to design. And eyes locked on the woman who had just accused me of breaking into my own mansion. She was wearing my silk bathrobe. It would have been laughable if it weren't for the 2 squad cars pulling into my driveway, red and blue lights painting stripes across my sleek glass exterior. A home I'd fought tooth and nail to build. A fortress I had designed from nothing. And now, the HOA president was living in it, calling the cops on me, the owner. But Barbara Clean had no idea. No idea that I'd returned 2 weeks early. No idea my phone wasn't just recording. And absolutely no idea she'd walked into the most precise digital trap I'd ever constructed. My name's Franklin Miles. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. My job is catching people exactly like her, but this one's personal. Let me tell you how we got here. 6 months ago, I finally bought my dream home. A towering modern estate of steel and glass nestled in a gated oak-lined neighborhood where every lawn looked like it belonged on the cover of a landscaping magazine. Peace, quiet, order. But in every story like this, there's always one thing that disrupts the calm, and in my case, that thing had a name. Barbara Clean. President of the HOA. Gatekeeper, dictator, professional meddler. I met her less than a week after moving in. She stood on my porch like she owned the sky, a clipboard in hand, and a smile that felt more like a threat than a welcome. Blonde ponytail too tight. Resort-wear blazer over a body fueled by bitterness and HOA bylaws. She wasn't impressed by my architectural design or my ultra-modern mailbox. In fact, she fined me $50 a day for it. Faux colonial green, she had said, tapping the clipboard. That's the community standard. I tried to reason with her. She blinked once and told me the rules are the rules. I replaced the mailbox. It was the first and last time I would yield. Because after that came a steady stream of passive-aggressive paper cuts. Garbage bins left out too long, fine. Japanese maple not pre-approved, fine. Package on the porch more than 3 hours, another fine. It was warfare by policy, a slow bleed, and I could feel her enjoying every drop. But the first time I realized she didn't just want power, she wanted control, was the day Arthur spoke to me. My neighbor, retired engineering professor. Kind eyes, worn flannel, and wisdom dripping off every word. She's been running this place like a medieval duchy, he said, leaning on the fence between our yards. Don't take it personally. She tried to fine a kid once for excessive balloonage at a birthday party. I laughed then, but it wasn't funny for long. Because when my Tokyo contract came up, a full-month engagement that would require me to be overseas, I knew I had to inform the HOA per the bylaws. Absences longer than 2 weeks required notice. I sent the email, May 1st to June 1st. I also activated every layer of my home security system, a proprietary network I'd built myself. Motion sensors, biometric logs, internal and external HD cameras, smart appliances that tracked everything from fridge contents to toilet water usage. It wasn't just a system. It was a digital ghost, my eyes and ears when I wasn't home. The first week in Tokyo was chaos. Jet lag, meetings, long hours. But somewhere in the haze of boardrooms and neon city lights, I got an alert. It was small. A thermostat reading. 72 degrees in my bedroom, manually set. That's odd, I thought, maybe a bug. Then came the fridge log. A new gallon of milk. A bottle of cheap Chardonnay. Yogurt I would never buy. My blood went cold. Next alert, Plex activity. Someone had streamed 3 hours of reality TV on my account the night before. I opened the internal camera feeds. And what I saw made my hands shake. Barbara and her husband Gary. On my couch. sipping from my wine glasses. Barefoot, relaxed, watching my TV like they belonged. They weren't robbing me. They were living in my house. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Barbara was draped in my cashmere throw, flipping channels while Gary laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. I felt my pulse in my neck. But I didn't call the police, not yet. Because calling them from Tokyo would have made me sound like a lunatic. She would say she was there for an inspection. She had the emergency key. She was the HOA president. Who would they believe? No. This was a chess match. And Barbara had just made a catastrophically arrogant move. I leaned back in my Tokyo hotel room, took a deep breath, and began to plan. She thought she was enjoying a private vacation. But in reality, she had just become the unwitting star of the most incriminating reality show ever produced. And I was the executive producer. I would not just catch her. I would destroy every inch of her narrative. Slowly, precisely, legally. And when I returned early, 2 weeks early, I would make sure she stepped into the spotlight and handed me the win herself. You won't believe what I uncovered next. Have you ever watched someone ruin their life, in high definition? I did. From a hotel room 6,000 miles away. Barbara Clean, HOA president, suburban tyrant, thief in silk robes, had no idea her secret vacation was being captured by 16 state-of-the-art security cameras. Every movement, every laugh, every bottle uncorked. And every word she spoke into my home's air was being recorded. The worst part, it wasn't just a violation of property. It was a desecration of memory. Because somewhere in her entitled wandering, Barbara had slipped into the master closet, the one with cedar panels and custom lighting, the one that still held the clothes of my late wife, Eleanor. And that's where I saw her. Draped in Eleanor's favorite silk scarf. Admiring herself in the mirror. Turning, smiling, twirling, as if she were trying on a new life. I stopped breathing. There's a kind of rage that doesn't explode, it calcifies. It hardens into something sharp and cold and focused. I clicked record. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about Eleanor. And the sanctuary I built in her memory. And how this woman, this petty queen of newsletters and parking citations, had waltzed into it like it was hers. No. She wasn't just going to be evicted. She was going to be exposed. I spent the rest of the night organizing the footage, dragging files into folders like an autopsy. Video, audio, data logs, power consumption charts, fridge inventory graphs, even toilet flushes, everything, labeled, time-stamped, untouchable. This wasn't revenge. This was digital prosecution. By dawn, I built an airtight timeline. She moved in the morning of May 2nd, the day after I left. She adjusted the thermostat, brought in groceries, wore my robe, cooked with my olive oil, poured herself a glass of my aged Glenfiddich neat. And then she hosted guests. Yes. 2 friends. They sat on my patio, laughed under the string lights I installed, ate steak grilled on my stainless steel Weber, and drank from a decanter my wife gave me for our 10th anniversary. I watched the footage in silence. No sound. Just the flicker of betrayal on screen. I didn't sleep that night. But I did activate the internal mics, legally, under one-party consent laws in our state. My home, my system, my rights. And then it happened. On May 7th at 4:42 p.m., Barbara stepped into my home office, the one where I closed million-dollar deals, and dialed her friend. "Oh, it's fabulous, Marge," she cooed, her voice smug and syrupy. "The owner's some rich tech nerd off in Asia for a month. House is just sitting here empty. The least I can do is make sure it. Operational, right?" She laughed, loud and awful. "Gary's in heaven with the TV. We'll be sad to go back to our little shoebox." I paused the audio, rewound it, played it again. This was it. Intent. Knowledge. Deception. Not negligence, not an accident. A plan. I labeled it Exhibit A and saved it to 3 separate encrypted servers. Then I backed it up to 2 air-gapped external drives. No way she was squirming out of this one. But it wasn't over. Because 2 days later, she handed me the kill shot. It was another conversation, this time with Gary. They were arguing, or rather, he was whimpering and she was steamrolling. "Barb, are you sure about this?" Gary's voice trembled. "What if he comes back early?" Barbara's reply hit like a gavel. "He won't. I have his itinerary. He's not due back till the 1st. He's a creature of habit. We just have to make sure we're completely out by the morning of the 31st. Clean everything up and he'll never even know we were here." Click saved, Exhibit B. That was the moment she sealed her own fate. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had my travel dates. She used her HOA power to steal a month in someone else's life. I stared at the screen for a long time after that. The sun rose over Tokyo, and I sat alone in my hotel room, more resolute than I'd ever been. This was no longer about catching her. It was about holding her accountable. It was time to call David Chen. David and I had worked together on a few corporate cases. He was the kind of lawyer who never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His words had weight. His pauses made people sweat. I sent him a secure message. Subject line, urgent, highly unusual matter. Attachments, low-res image of Barbara in my bathrobe. Audio clip of "He'll never even know." He called me in under an hour. "Frank," he said, his voice calm but deadly serious, "in 20 years of litigation I've seen all kinds of stupid. But this is Olympic-level arrogance." We planned for an hour straight. Step 1, let her get comfortable. We wouldn't confront her, not yet. We'd let her believe she'd gotten away with it. Step 2, accelerate my return. I booked a flight for May 15th, 2 weeks early. She'd be halfway through her fantasy, relaxed, unprepared, confident. The trap would be physical now, not just digital. "I want you to walk into that house like you never left," David said. "Let her be the one who panics. Let her call the cops. Her outrage will be the rope she hangs herself with." And that's exactly what I did. The flight home was a blur. 12 hours of planning, replanning, double-checking logs. When I landed, I didn't go to the usual limo service. I didn't want anything familiar. I hailed a yellow cab and had them drop me 2 blocks from my subdivision. As I rolled my suitcase past Barbara's own modest home, pristine Mercedes parked in front, I smiled. She wasn't home. Of course not. She was at the mansion. My mansion. I walked the last few hundred feet. Birds chirping, sprinklers hissing, everything still. And there she was. Barbara. Lounging on my front porch like she was the Queen of Versailles. She wore Eleanor's silk kimono like it was hers. A wine glass rested on the arm of the chair, a book in her lap. She looked peaceful. Until she saw me. At first, confusion. Then a flicker of recognition. And then panic. Pure, undiluted panic. She stood abruptly, the wine glass nearly tipping. "Who are you?" she snapped. "This is private property." I stopped at the base of the porch, set down my suitcase, and looked her straight in the eye. "Hello, Barbara, I live here." Her face flushed. "That's impossible," she snapped. "The owner isn't due back for 2 weeks." There it was. The confession. But she didn't stop. She reached for her phone like it was a sword. "I'm calling the police. You're a trespasser." And I let her. Every word she said was another nail in her own coffin. The sirens arrived in minutes. Neighbors came out. Arthur stood on his lawn with his arms folded. 2 police cruisers. Lights. Doors flung open. A young cop and an older sergeant stepped out, hands near their belts. "Ma'am, sir, what's going on here?" the sergeant asked. Barbara pointed at me. "That man broke into this house. I'm the HOA president. I demand you arrest him." The younger officer stepped toward me. "Sir, I need to see your hands." I raised them. "My name is Franklin Miles," I said, voice calm. "This is my home. There's been a misunderstanding." Sergeant Miller asked for ID. I offered it slowly, respectfully. He glanced at the address. Then at me. Then at the house. His tone changed. "Ma'am," he said to Barbara, "his license lists this address as his residence." Barbara flinched. "So what? That proves nothing. It could be fake." "Officers," I said, "would you allow me to approach the front door?" They nodded. I walked past her, up the steps. Placed my thumb on the biometric lock. Click. The door opened. Silence. And then, right on cue, a sleek black sedan pulled up. David Chen stepped out in a tailored navy suit, leather briefcase in hand. And Barbara's perfect little empire began to crumble. Some moments hit with the silence of a storm about to break. The front door to my mansion hung open by an inch, my fingerprint still fresh on the scanner. Barbara stood frozen. Her wine glass was trembling on the edge of the table. And down the driveway, David Chen closed the door of his black sedan and walked toward us with the kind of calm that carries consequences. He didn't speak right away. Didn't need to. His presence said it all. Tailored navy suit, dark leather briefcase, eyes like steel, the kind of man you didn't argue with, not if you valued your future. The sergeant glanced up. "Can I help you, sir?" David extended his hand. "Sergeant Miller, my name is David Chen. I'm Mr. Franklin Miles' legal counsel." The shift was instant. The energy changed. The air grew heavy with something sharper than suspicion. It was confirmation. Confirmation that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the real thing. David turned, nodded toward Barbara. "And I believe we've all just walked into something highly illegal." Barbara's lips parted, but no words came out. Her face was red, a blotchy, furious red, like someone who just realized the show she was starring in wasn't hers to direct anymore. "Officers," David continued, "my client is the sole legal owner of this property. He has just returned early from a business trip initially scheduled to conclude on June 1st. He paused, giving that date time to linger. A sharp line, a fatal timestamp. "We have reason to believe that this woman, Mrs. Barbara Clean, has been unlawfully occupying the premises for over 2 weeks." Barbara's voice cracked into the tension. "That's a lie. I was performing inspections. There were issues with the plumbing." David didn't even look at her. Instead, he opened his briefcase slowly, deliberately, and withdrew a slim black tablet. He tapped the screen. "Inspections," he repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now? Because this tablet contains HD video and audio recordings showing Mrs. Clean sleeping in my client's bed, drinking his wine, wearing his late wife's clothing, and—" Barbara snapped, "You're twisting this. This is slander." But David was unshaken, calm, cutting. "We also have a voice recording of her admitting that she accessed Mr. Miles' travel itinerary, that she entered the home knowing it would be empty, and planned to vacate the property before his scheduled return to avoid detection." The officers exchanged glances. The tension was no longer speculative, it was procedural. David turned the tablet around. "Let's save everyone some time." He pressed play. Barbara's voice filled the front lawn, crisp, clear, undeniable. "He won't. I have his itinerary. He's not due back until the 1st. We just have to be out by the 31st. Clean everything up and he'll never even know we were here." The silence afterward was suffocating. Even the birds had gone quiet. Barbara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, then to the officers. Her shoulders sagged, posture collapsing under the weight of her own words. And then the door creaked. From inside the house, another figure emerged. Gary. Her husband. His face was pale, forehead shiny with sweat. His shirt clung to him in damp patches of nervous shame. He stepped onto the porch like a man walking into his own execution. "I'm sorry," he blurted. Barbara's head whipped around. "Gary." "I told her it was a bad idea," he cried, hands half raised. "I didn't want to do it. She said we'd be out before you got back." He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a man who'd been surviving, not scheming. "She made me do it," he whispered. And that was it. That was the final crack in her crown. Sergeant Miller stepped forward. His tone was no longer friendly. "Barbara Clean," he said, voice clear and cold, "you are under arrest for unlawful entry, criminal trespassing, theft, and unauthorized use of private property." Barbara blinked, shook her head like it might change something. You caw." But Officer Reed was already behind her, slipping the handcuffs on with a ratcheting click that echoed down the street. It was over. Neighbors stood frozen behind hedges and mailboxes. Some were recording. Arthur stood tall in his lawn, arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction carved across his face. As Barbara was guided to the back seat of the squad car, her eyes met mine. There was no fire left, no fight, just disbelief. She had believed so deeply in her fake authority, the thin veneer of power the HOA gave her, that she'd confused herself with the law. She forgot the law still answered to evidence. And I had all of it. When the car door slammed shut, a strange hush settled over the cul-de-sac, like everyone was holding their breath, like the air had just been purified. David exhaled. "Well," he said, adjusting his cuffs, "that went even better than expected." He glanced at me. "You ready for phase 2? I nodded, because this wasn't just about a criminal arrest. This was about the entire system she built and what we were about to do to it. Later that evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The clubhouse was packed, the chairs filled, the walls lined with neighbors clutching coffee cups and gossip. Barbara's arrest had spread like wildfire. The HOA board members, the spineless yes-men who had cowered under her rule, sat in a row, looking like deer in headlights. They expected me to sue. But I had something better in mind. David stood first, clicking a remote to begin a short but devastating slideshow. Clips, stills, transcripts, enough to break the illusion of power Barbara had cloaked herself in for years. She used the emergency key bylaw to gain access, David explained, a rule that gives one person the ability to enter any home in the subdivision. That bylaw, as written, is a legal and security liability. People gasped, murmurs rippled. A few hands shot up, angry and afraid. And then I stood. Not with fire, not with fury, just calm, clear, factual. "I'm not here to punish the board," I said. "I'm here to stop this from ever happening again." I clicked to the next slide, a still of Barbara lounging on my patio with a glass of my scotch, smiling. This is what happens when power is unchecked. A hand rose from the audience. "I propose a vote," a woman said. "Effective immediately, we repeal the emergency key bylaw." Unanimous. The board members looked at each other. Pale, sweating, one by one they resigned. Barbara's kingdom was gone. In the quiet that followed, a voice called from the back. "Nominate Franklin." A cheer rose, a chant, but I raised my hand and shook my head. "I'm not a politician," I said. "I'm a problem solver, and my problem's been solved." But I did nominate Arthur. And when the crowd gave him a standing ovation, I saw something powerful, a community waking up. Not just from Barbara's reign, but from the illusion that one person could control them with paper threats and fake titles. That night, as I walked back to my house, my home, the lights were warm, the air was still, and for the first time in weeks I felt peace. The green mailbox was already gone. The black steel one, my original design, was back. Sleek, minimalist, unapologetic. Just like the truth. Some justice arrives with sirens. But some arrives with signatures, court dates, and the humiliating clack of a judge's gavel. Barbara's arrest was just the opening move. The real reckoning came in the weeks that followed. By the time her mugshot hit the county record system, the neighborhood had turned into a live-action commentary channel. Front yard whispers, late-night lawn chair huddles. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had something to say. And every word of it, every whispered, "Did you hear about Barbara?" was built on facts she gave me herself. The police had enough to book her on felony trespassing, unlawful entry, and theft of property. But the most damning element wasn't what she did, it was how she said it. That audio recording. It went viral in court. David had handed it to the district attorney on a flash drive labeled Exhibit A, Royal Delusion. Barbara's lawyer barely tried to fight it. It was a landslide. Her voice, proud and sharp on tape. "We just have to make sure we're out by the 31st. He'll never even know we were here." That single line buried every defense her legal team tried to construct. She pleaded guilty to criminal trespass and theft to avoid trial. Her sentence: 3 years of probation. A massive fine. Mandatory counseling. And a full restitution order for every dollar she stole, and every item she touched. Let me be clear, I didn't want vengeance. I wanted precision. So I gave David an itemized list. Not just estimates. Not about a bottle of wine or some groceries. No, this was forensic. $68.49 in single-origin coffee beans. $310.92 in aged Glenfiddich and rare Japanese whiskey. $172 in groceries, including the worst Chardonnay on the market. $1,400 in deep cleaning and restoration for my wife's silk scarves. $3,200 in guest occupancy violations. $400 for unauthorized use of my digital media services. $96.50 in energy use spikes. $11.50 for the lavender-scented toilet paper Barbara, special ordered on my Amazon account. And that was just the start. David submitted the invoice, printed in bold black ink, to the court with an attached cover letter. Every cent on this list was part of someone else's life, someone who never gave her permission. When the judge ruled that Barbara owed me the full amount, plus attorney's fees, she didn't even look up. And then, in what can only be described as poetic irony, her husband Gary, yes, the same man who begged for forgiveness on my porch, quietly listed their house for sale. Legal fees, restitution, reputation gone. They had no choice. Arthur was the one who told me. He spotted the U-Haul early one morning. Barbara didn't look up from the boxes. Gary looked like he hadn't slept in days. And me, I watched from my office. Didn't wave. Didn't gloat. Just watched the last remnant of her self-proclaimed kingdom roll away on rented wheels. But my battle wasn't just with Barbara. It was with the system she weaponized. And that meant cleaning up what she left behind. The HOA had always been her stage, the bylaw about emergency keys. That wasn't about safety, it was about access, control, superiority. She didn't use it to protect the community. She used it to invade it. At the emergency HOA meeting, the one that ended her board's reign, the crowd had been united in a way I hadn't seen before. They weren't angry at me. They were angry at what they let happen. David and I stood before them again, this time not to present evidence, but to offer closure. He laid out the legal risk. Your bylaw gave one woman the keys to every home in this neighborhood. Do you understand the liability you're sitting on? Someone whispered, "We didn't know." You didn't ask, David replied. We weren't there to punish. We were there to dismantle the weapon. And we did. The emergency key bylaw was voted out. Unanimously. Followed by 5 board resignations. They begged me to run for president. But I said no. Because I didn't want power. I wanted peace. Instead, I stood, turned to Arthur, and nominated him. The old professor turned pink in the cheeks, stammered at first, until the crowd stood and applauded. Loud, relentless. Arthur gave a tiny smile and accepted. And just like that, our neighborhood got its soul back. Weeks passed, the house felt different. I walked barefoot through the marble-floored kitchen again. No wine glass on the counter. No scent of cheap perfume in the hall. No paranoia lurking behind doors. Just silence. Peace. The ugly green mailbox Barbara had forced on me. Gone. In its place, my original black steel minimalist design, sharp, clean, unapologetic. Like the truth. One afternoon, I sat on the back patio, the same patio where Barbara once entertained guests with my liquor. I poured a glass of that same scotch. Not to erase her memory, but to reclaim it. Because she never really wanted my house. She wanted my life. The success, the calm, the sense of control she could never manufacture with fake Mercedes polish or printed rules. She used to scoff at me. Called me the quiet tech guy. But what she never understood was this. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means patient. It means observant. It means gathering information and waiting for the perfect moment. That's what I do. Not just in cybersecurity. In life. People like Barbara. They build their world out of threats and appearance. And when you take that away, when you hit back with facts and law and calm certainty, they crumble. Because they never built anything real. The restitution check arrived weeks later. David slid it across my kitchen island in a manila envelope. I didn't even look at the amount. Instead, I took the check, flipped it over, signed it, and wrote the name of a local nonprofit that builds emergency housing for women and children escaping abuse. A home for someone who needs one. It felt like balance. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just something made right. David raised a brow. You're giving it away. I smiled. Barbara turned my home into a crime scene. I'm turning hers into shelter. There's a line I used in a pitch once. Didn't think much of it at the time, but it stayed with me since all this went down. In digital systems and neighborhoods alike, power is safest in the hands of those who don't crave it. Barbara craved it. She clung to it. And it ruined her. She saw me as quiet, dull, easy to control. She never saw the data streams watching her. The logs. The mic. The plan quietly forming in the background. She thought she was the wolf. But the sheepdog had been watching all along from halfway across the world, and when the time came, it didn't bark. It bit. And now, the neighborhood is different. Arthur walks the sidewalks in a sun hat and sandals. The new board puts out newsletters about community gardens, not mailbox violations. There's laughter again. And my house, my sanctuary, is mine once more. Not because I fought loud, but because I fought smart. Barbara thought she'd walk away with a secret summer vacation. Instead, she walked straight into a digital trap with 16 cameras, a world-class lawyer, and a man who refused to be intimidated. And if there's a lesson here, it's not just about security. It's this. Arrogance can take your keys. But truth takes your crown. It's strange how quiet victory can be. There were no fireworks. No dramatic music playing in the background. Just the sound of a breeze brushing through the oaks that lined our cul-de-sac, trees older than Barbara's rules, and far more dignified. The storm had passed. Barbara was gone. The board had crumbled. And the HOA that once felt like a boot on my neck, now barely registered in my day-to-day life. But sometimes, it's not what you lose that defines you. It's what you gain back. For me, that was silence. Freedom. And something I hadn't felt in a long time, trust in where I lived. You wouldn't think an HOA drama would leave scars, but it does. When someone violates the one place you go to escape the world, something inside you shifts. You second-guess every creak in the hallway, every shadow across the camera feed, every HOA envelope left in the mailbox. But healing comes, not all at once, but piece by piece. And for me, healing started with Arthur. He never asked for the position. He was nominated, applauded, practically carried into office by a neighborhood desperate for sanity. He accepted only after making one thing clear. I'm not here to police, I'm here to serve. That one line changed the tone of everything. The HOA newsletter, once a printed scroll of citations, threats, and passive-aggressive phrasing, now opened with jokes, community spotlights, and the occasional recipe from Arthur's wife. Instead of fines for mailbox color, people received friendly visits about community standards. Instead of being yelled at for having a balloon at a birthday party, kids were offered sidewalk chalk and juice boxes. It felt like we were living in a neighborhood again, not a miniature dictatorship. Arthur even hosted monthly front porch chats. No boardrooms, no intimidating procedures, just lawn chairs, coffee, and conversation. One evening, I joined him. We sat on his porch sipping cold brewed tea as the sun dipped behind the trees. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses and gave me a grin that said more than words ever could. She never saw it coming, did she? He asked. I shook my head. She didn't even realize what game she was playing. Arthur chuckled. She brought a clipboard to a digital war. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Sometimes, the people who fight the quiet battles understand each other without explanation. Barbara's name still popped up occasionally, like a ghost that forgot it wasn't welcome. A neighbor mentioned she'd been spotted at a grocery store across town, trying to argue with a cashier about expired coupons. Someone else heard she was working part-time at a design firm, though it was hard to picture her taking orders from anyone. The court had barred her from serving on any HOA in the county for a decade. It was poetic, really. The woman who once declared herself the guardian of suburban order was now legally banned from managing so much as a hedge. Gary filed for divorce quietly. No scandal. Just escape. He sold what little he had left and moved to a small apartment outside the city. I saw him once, by coincidence, walking out of a gas station on the interstate. He looked thinner, older. He noticed me but didn't speak. Just gave me a small nod, something between apology and relief. And then he drove off. Barbara had built her life like a fortress, walls of status, windows of vanity. But once the foundation cracked, the whole thing collapsed. There was no rebuilding it. Some people pretend so hard to be royalty that they forget kingdoms are made of people, not paper. And without fear to hold them in place, the people walk away. Spring gave way to summer. The neighborhood bloomed. Children played soccer in the cul-de-sac. Couples walked dogs without worrying about leash-length rules. Someone even installed a gnome village in their front yard, something Barbara would have had a coronary over. I passed it every morning and smiled. For the first time since I moved in, I felt like I belonged. I started spending more time outside, not to patrol but to enjoy, to live. I fixed the garden lights that had been collecting dust, repainted the trim Alina had picked out before she passed, restored the old swing chair she used to sit in, her journal in hand, legs tucked underneath her. It wasn't grief anymore. It was a gratitude. Barbara may have invaded my space. But in the end, I reclaimed it in ways she never could. Not with security footage. Not with court orders. But with presence. With peace. With the quiet satisfaction of knowing that every square inch of this home, the glass, the marble, the steel, is mine again. Not just by law, but by love. One afternoon, Arthur dropped by with a stack of newsletters. "Thought you might want the first printed issue of the new HOA charter," he said. I flipped through it. The language was different, warmer, smarter, less like rules, more like values. At the end was a short note, hand-signed by Arthur. "No homeowner should ever feel unsafe in their own home again. This board exists to protect you, not control you." Below it, a list of signatures, neighbors, board members, new and old. It felt like a pact. And at the bottom, mine. I hadn't signed it physically, but Arthur had added it for me, a quiet gesture, a nod of recognition. "Is that legal?" I asked with a smirk. Arthur shrugged. "We'll grandfather it in." We laughed. And then he paused. "I have to say, Frank, you changed more than just this HOA. You reminded people that quiet doesn't mean weak, that being kind doesn't mean being soft." He looked down the street, where someone was planting flowers under their mailbox. My sleek black steel design now the new unofficial community trend. "You made people remember what neighborhoods are supposed to feel like." That stayed with me. Because this whole time, I thought I was just reclaiming my house. But maybe, in doing that, I helped reclaim something bigger. A sense of dignity. A standard of truth. A reminder that power built on fear collapses the second someone says, no. That night, I sat on the patio again. Same scotch, same view, same peace. But something felt different. Lighter. The house no longer felt like a fortress, it felt like a home. I leaned back, eyes tracing the stars above the trees. And I thought of Alina. Of the strength she carried quietly. Of how she taught me that silence is not absence, it's awareness. That stillness is not weakness, it's wisdom. Barbara thought she had walked into a silent home. What she didn't realize was that the silence was listening. And when the time came, it spoke. With facts. With calm. With the quiet thunder of truth. You never really know who's watching until the storm clears. I thought the story was over. I thought the final chapter had been written, in handcuffs and courtrooms. But sometimes, the most important part of the story comes after the climax, in the quiet, in the ripple. And that's where I started to feel something unexpected, connection. It began the week after Arthur's new charter went live. I was walking past one of the houses I never gave much thought to, a modest two-story with lilacs by the fence, and a welcome mat so faded it was barely readable. A woman I'd seen, but never really met, was watering plants in her driveway. She looked up, hesitated, and then smiled. "I never said thank you," she said. I blinked, sorry. "For what you did, with Barbara, with all of it." She walked closer, lowering the watering can. "I used to hide packages in the backseat of my car just to avoid fines," she admitted. "I'd set timers for my garbage cans. My kids were scared to decorate for Halloween." Her voice cracked. "We didn't think anyone would ever stand up to her, and then you did." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She smiled again, the kind of smile that comes from relief, not routine, and stepped back into her yard. And that was when it hit me. Barbara hadn't just trespassed into my home. She had trespassed into all of us, into our routines, our comfort, our silence. She had lived rent-free not just in my house, but in everyone's sense of safety. And because I fought back, they started to breathe again. More stories followed. A retired nurse from 3 houses down left a handwritten note in my mailbox. "Thank you for protecting your wife's memory. It reminded me to protect mine." A teenager I'd never spoken to, the one with the green mohawk and earbuds glued in, gave me a respectful nod one day and muttered, "Your story's all over Reddit." That was savage. I laughed out loud. Even the elderly couple with the immaculate rose garden, who once reported me for using off-brand mulch, waved warmly as I passed. It was surreal. Because I didn't set out to be a neighborhood hero. I set out to protect my life and Alina's memory. But in doing that, I gave other people permission to defend their own corners of peace. And the community changed. Not just structurally, spiritually. Porch lights stayed on longer. Kids rode their bikes further. Neighbors actually started talking again, not whispering. And I started living. Really living. One Saturday afternoon, I invited Arthur over for barbecue. He showed up in a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts that should have been illegal, and 2 bottles of lemonade his wife had made from scratch. We grilled burgers, listened to old jazz, and laughed like old friends, even though technically we'd only become friends recently. Somewhere between bites, Arthur leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Frank, what do you think Barbara wanted?" I paused, thought about it. Control, status, respect. But none of those seemed right. "She wanted someone else's peace," I said. Arthur nodded slowly. "Yeah, and she thought if she wrapped herself in it long enough, it'd become hers. But peace can't be borrowed. It can't be stolen. It's something you build, inch by inch, day by day, in the quiet of your own choices." Barbara didn't know that. She thought peace was a product, a perk of HOA dominance, a silk robe, a chilled wine glass, a house that wasn't hers. But those things never made her calm. They just made her look calm. Until the truth walked through the door. A few days later, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A letter. Not typed, not printed. Handwritten on pale blue paper, with cursive ink that looked practiced, deliberate. It was from Gary. I stood on my front porch and read it under the morning light. "Frank, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want to apologize truly. I was weak. I let her convince me that what we were doing wasn't wrong, that it was harmless, that we deserved it. But watching her fall, I realized something. I was never her partner. I was her audience. And it took your return, your calmness, your clarity, to show me just how far I'd sunk. I hope you find peace in that house again. I hope it feels safe, sacred. It should. Because what you did wasn't just smart, it was noble." Gary. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer of my office desk, the one Alina used to keep her favorite notes and memories. Not because I forgave him, but because he was finally free too. Late one evening, I found myself walking the property line. The stars were out. The trees were quiet. And the security lights blinked gently, like calm, glowing sentinels. I paused by the small cedar bench Alina had commissioned years ago, the one we rarely sat on, but never replaced. And for the first time since she passed, I sat there. Just sat. No phone, no tablet, no surveillance feed. And I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. This wasn't just about HOA politics. It wasn't just about Barbara. It was about loss. Barbara violated my home, yes. But more than that, she trampled through something sacred. This house was the last place I saw Alina smile. The last place we made plans. Shared meals. Talked about the future that never came. When Barbara wore that silk scarf, it wasn't just theft. It was trespass into memory. And that's what I fought for, not just property lines or legal definitions. I fought for her. For our space. Our loves. Our legacy. And I won. Not just with facts, but with patience. With silence. With the truth. It's funny how quiet peace can be. No headlines. No cheers. Just the rhythmic hum of life resuming. And sometimes that's enough. Because when you fight for your space, your name, your memories, and win, the world doesn't explode. It exhales. And finally, so did I. It started with a simple flyer in my mailbox. Community block party hosted by the new HOA. Saturday, 3 p.m. Food, music, and neighbors, real ones. There was a note scribbled at the bottom in pen. You better show up, Arthur. I smiled as I turned the flyer over in my hand. A year ago, a community party would have been unimaginable. Barbara would have turned it into a compliance nightmare. Maximum of 12 helium balloons per household. HOA-approved plastic tableware only. No music above 42 decibels. And absolutely no inflatable bounce houses. But now it was different. The air felt lighter. The sidewalks felt warmer. And the idea of stepping out of gathering didn't feel like a performance, it felt like coming home. Still, I hesitated. It wasn't fear, not anymore, it was memory. This house, this land, it had been through battle. And even peace takes time to trust. But Saturday arrived. And I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of a linen shirtaliner once picked out for me. She said it made me look less like a codebreaker and more like a man who drinks lemonade on porches. Maybe today, I'd finally be both. The street was alive. Children ran past with ice pops dripping in their hands. Neighbors laughed over barbecue and cornhole. A jazz band, real, live, and slightly off-key, played from someone's driveway. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't curated. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt like a community. Arthur was standing near a table of deviled eggs, wearing a ridiculous straw hat, and passing out reusable water bottles that said, HOA 2, hydrated, not hateful. He saw me and grinned like I was a long-lost brother. Told you you'd come. I wasn't sure, I admitted. He handed me a bottle. You don't need to be sure, you just need to be present. And somehow, that felt enough. People came up shyly at first, then more confidently, they introduced themselves, shared names, stories, laughter. Turns out I had neighbors who raised bees. Another who restored vintage typewriters. One woman ran a secret Instagram account documenting the worst mailbox designs in the city. Barbara's faux colonial green box was legendary. The night stretched on. String lights flickered across lawns. Someone lit a fire pit. Kids roasted marshmallows while parents swapped recipes for vegan potato salad and grilled ribs. Then came the moment that surprised me. A girl, maybe 16, approached me. I'm sorry, she said. I blinked, for what? She glanced at the ground. For the prank last year, the one with the garden gnome. Barbara fined you for improper placement of statuary. That was me. She looked up sheepish. I was mad she fined my mom for having a pride flag. I thought maybe if I got you in trouble too, people would finally see how dumb the rules were. I let that hang there. Then I smiled. That gnome had style. She grinned, relief rushing into her face. Thanks for not hatting me. I don't, I said. And I meant it. Because the real damage wasn't done by her prank. It was done by the silence we all lived under. That was over now. The party began to wind down. The music faded. People packed up chairs and waved across driveways. Someone handed out leftover cupcakes with little frosting sunflowers. I was just about to head home when I noticed a car parked a few houses down. Not flashy, not suspicious, just unfamiliar. A woman stepped out. Late 30s, dark hair in a loose braid, glasses, a satchel over one shoulder. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the homes like she was trying to recognize something that had changed too much. And then she stopped in front of mine. Her eyes lingered on the porch. On the swing. On the black steel mailbox. She took a breath. And then she turned to me. Franklin. I froze. She said my name like she already knew it, like it wasn't a guess, it was a certainty wrapped in memory. Yes, I said cautiously. She took another step closer. I'm Alina's sister, my name's Dana. I hadn't seen her in years. Not since the funeral. Not since she stood behind the crowd, grief-shy, overwhelmed, and left before the last words were spoken. Now here she was, quiet, sincere. And every memory hit me at once. Eleanor's laugh, her voice, her eyes. The way she and Dana used to bicker over Christmas decorations. The way they once got matching leather journals just to write about boys and barcodes. I stepped forward. You look just like her. Dana smiled. That's what people say. We stood in silence. Then she gestured to the house. May I? I nodded. We walked to the porch together. The swing creaked gently under the weight of two people who had lost the same soul in different ways. I saw the story, she said after a while. What Barbara did, what you did to stop her. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. Dana looked out at the street, quiet now, soft with post-party contentment. She always loved this place, Dana said. Even before you moved in, she'd sketch houses like this. Big windows, clean lines, space to breathe. She turned toward me, her eyes brimming. She would have been proud of you. That undid me. Not with tears, not with collapse. But with stillness. The kind that shakes more than shouting ever could. She is proud, Dana added softly. You turned a crime into a legacy. You didn't just protect your home, you protected her memory. I looked down at my hands. Calloused, quiet, always building, always fixing. I had done what I knew how to do. I had secured what mattered. And now, even the past was beginning to heal. We talked for another hour. About Eleanor. About childhood. About the way grief doesn't end, it just transforms. Before Dana left, she pulled something from her satchel, a small black notebook. The leather was worn but well kept. I found this in her things, she said. She mentioned the house, your plans. She wrote about the mailbox. I smiled, of course she did. Dana placed the notebook in my hands. She wrote, if we ever get that place, I'll finally be home. And then she walked away. No fanfare, no grand farewell. Just the silent exit of someone who knew her part in the story was finished, for now. I sat on the porch long after she left. Notebook in my lap. Swing creaking gently. The night wrapped around me like a quiet truce. And I read. Eleanor's words, her sketches, her list of furniture, notes about paint colors, quotes from books, a doodle of me holding a coffee mug labeled King of Data, Lord of Quiet Spaces. Every page brought her closer. Not in grief, but in presence. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a story. A symbol. A promise fulfilled. She dreamt it. I built it. And together, in some strange, sacred way, we defended it. Sometimes people think justice is loud. But the truest kind. It's silent. It's sturdy. It's a mailbox that stands in defiance of fake authority. A community that laughs again. A memory that lives on protected. Barbara's reign had ended long ago. But now, something else had begun. Not just peace. Not just closure. Legacy. They say a home is just walls and a roof, until you fill it with stories. If that's true, then this house isn't just my story anymore. It's ours. Mine, Eleanor's, Arthur, Dana's, even the neighbors who once feared their own front lawns. And somehow, in a twist I never saw coming, it even includes Barbara. Because every villain is still part of the tale. Her mistake was thinking power could be taken by force, that rules were stronger than trust, that appearance mattered more than permission. But what she forgot, what so many people forget, is that truth doesn't blink. It waits. And when it speaks, it doesn't scream. It simply shows up. Calm. Undeniable. Unshakable. That's what I became. Not the man who fought fire with fire, but the man who stood still, long enough for her own lies to surround her. She wrote the ending the moment she put on Alina's scarf. She just didn't know the cameras were rolling. It's been months since the block party. The HOA has never been stronger, not because it has more rules, but because it finally understands its purpose. To serve. Not to control. To protect. Not to punish. Arthur's porch chats are a regular thing now. We talk about silly things, lawnmower brands, mulch preferences, what to do about the raccoon that keeps getting into Martha's compost bin. But every now and then, someone new joins the circle, a neighbor who finally feels safe to speak. And that's when the real healing happens. I've watched fences get replaced, lawns replanted, friendships reseeded. But nothing hit me harder than what happened last week. I was walking past the spot where Barbara's house used to be, or rather, where her kingdom used to stand. The for sale sign was long gone, and a new family had moved in. I didn't expect anything when I saw the dad in the driveway, tinkering with a toy drone while his daughter laughed from the front steps. But when I looked closer, I saw something that stopped me cold. Their mailbox. It was black. A steel. Minimalist. Unapologetically modern. Just like mine. I stood there stunned until the man noticed me. "Oh hey," he said, wiping his hands. "You must be Franklin, we've heard about you." I laughed, "All good things, I hope." He smiled. "Your mailbox design, it's kind of become a symbol around here." He pointed at it with a grin. "We saw pictures in the community group, the survivor mailbox, someone called it." I nodded, speechless. His daughter ran past us chasing the drone, giggling. And in that moment, that small, silly moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride. Not closure. Peace. Real, final, grounded peace. Because this wasn't about a mailbox anymore. It was about legacy. Later that day, I went to the bench Alina had loved, the one where she once promised me this house would be more than a place to sleep. I brought her notebook with me, the one Dana gave me. I turned to the last page, blank. And for the first time since she passed, I wrote in it. The house is full now. Not just with memories, with people, with laughter. With stories and strength. You were right. We found our home. I closed the book. And I didn't cry. Because some victories don't end in tears. They end in stillness. In knowing you kept a promise, even after the person you made it to is gone. I still keep the footage, the files, the logs. Not out of spite, not even out of caution. But because one day, someone might ask how to stand up for something without burning everything down. And I'll show them. This is how you win a war, not with noise, but with clarity. This is how you take back your name, not with anger, but with evidence. This is how you protect what matters, not with walls, but with values. Barbara vanished from our lives. Her name only comes up in cautionary tales and whispered HOA jokes. I heard, secondhand, she's moved to a different state. I hope she finds something real to hold on to. Because the saddest part. She never understood what she had. A home, a husband, a life. But it wasn't enough. So she tried to take mine. And in the process, she lost hers. That's the thing about envy. It doesn't want what you have. It wants what you mean. And I had something she never built. Sanctuary. One last thing. There's a security camera I never reactivated. The one in the master closet. It's still mounted, still wired, still functional. But I turned it off. Because that room isn't for surveillance anymore. It's for Alina. And for me. And for the quiet reminder that the most sacred places in our lives are the ones we don't need to guard, because we've already defended them once, and we know we can again. Some people think cybersecurity is about fear. But I've always known the truth. The best protection is presence. The best armor is honesty. And the strongest defense is knowing who you are, no matter who tries to tell you otherwise. That's what this house became. A monument. A shield. A promise kept. Not just to a leaner, but to myself. And to anyone who ever thought silence meant surrender. It never did. It meant I was watching. And when the time came, I acted. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.